Well, welcome to a very special edition of the CHEK Blog today. As you can see, I've got not just one, but two people with me today. This is a meeting of the minds. Super excited to have both Warren Williams and Jator Pierre with us today. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Meeting of the hearts, James. Meeting of the hearts.
Hearts and minds. How about we do that? It's not one or the other. It's both.
No. Only heart. Only heart.
Well, we'll try to bring a little mind to it then. After maybe our viewers can add a little mind to it as well. But I'm excited. I'm excited to have the both of you with me today. And we've got a great topic. I'm really excited about this topic. One of our viewers wrote in, and I think it was in response to Jator, one of the talks that you and I did, and asked a great question. And I think it's a question that a lot of people have in their heads. It's certainly kind of a controversial question that's a lot of ink has been spilled on. A lot of people have been talked about. The question is, it comes from, I'm apologizing for how I say your name, but I think it's C.H.E.K. C.H.E.K wrote in to ask, are video games something I can incorporate into a healthy lifestyle? And he asked a little bit more in there, but that's the essence of his question. And I think it's a great question. And this point, I think, has been discussed a lot, not just from a physical standpoint, but also from a developmental and mental, emotional standpoint. And so I wanted to get Jator and Warren together, in part because I will say I've been playing video games off and on since I was about 7 or 8. And now I'm 45, and so that's about 38 years of playing games. And now we have video games, and now we have children who've grown up their entire lives playing video games. And so I think this question is even more pertinent in a way, because now we have 30 years of this or so. And so what kind of consequences does that have? And can we do it in a way that sort of satisfies that video game craving that we have, and yet allows us to be healthy? So, Warren, you actually have done a little research on this topic, and maybe that's a great place to kind of kick this off.
Yeah, so obviously there's, like Jator was talking about off camera as well, there's, positives and negatives to everything. So before Jator gets into the mental and emotional stuff, I kind of wanted to just touch on some of the actual stats and some of the actual, statements that have been put out about video games. So I'm going to go through the kind of negative and positive. So the positive, what some research has found positively, is that video gaming can improve attention, cognitive control, the visuospatial skills such as the space between objects or depth perception. It increases social benefit. I know it sounds weird, but they state that there are social benefits, because when you think about a lot of the people that play gaming, they're typically loners. They stay in. They don't conversate with people. So when you think about this multiplayer realm that we have today, there are a lot of people that can get online and actually make friends. So they say there's social benefits to it. And they say because there is a lot more complex games, such as, like you said, James, yourself, where as an older man, you can actually still get benefit from games. A lot of that is because of, mental deciphering of codes and, all these sort of things that are in games. So there's a mental developmental process that they say is beneficial for humans as well. So what we're talking to summarize is spatial awareness, cognitive control, increased attention, and social programming or social connection are the positives. The negative, what they say, it was that this perception of the reward process, where the area of the brain is constantly needing some form of reward, so it leads to addiction. And then the negative, which was powerful, which we all know, is desensitization of violence or to violence. People just seeing blood and gore when they're 7 or 8 years old and being desensitized. And stats have shown that 71% of all people that actually play video games have sleep issues as well, because they're up at nighttime playing these games. And then they were saying that because of the blue light screens when they play these games, that can affect their ability to get into an REM sleep. So they call it internet gaming disorder, where it can affect sleep, social issues. It makes children argue with their parents, and also induces an eating disorder. But they said the eating disorder part of it affects mainly girls more than boys. So those are kind of just the stats on it. So there's positives, but there are a lot more negatives.
Yeah. Oh, that's really fascinating. And it seems like you get sort of counterbalancing of benefits as well. So you get some social interaction, but on the other hand, it makes you argumentative with people that you meet in real life, right? So there's this strange kind of maybe canceling out of benefits in a way. So, but that's really fascinating. So yeah, Jator, you want to sort of talk about these?
What I wanted to start with is first and foremost how irrelevant I feel on this talk because I don't have a very cool accent. So that's first. I feel out of the bag on that one. So thanks, Warren. I'll blame that on you.
Well, I'm going to extend the invitation to try if you want.
The other piece that I love that Warren said, at least what I heard him say, was to you, James, an older man playing video games. So I appreciate that. You're in the older man category. Oh, man, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's the beard. It does it every time.
It's the beard. Yeah. It's the beard. Yeah, I appreciate, thanks, Warren, for sharing that. I appreciate the light and the shadow aspects of what video games represent and how they show up in people's lives. And myself being a player when I was a kid, one of the first things that I would consider around video games outside of the research is what does the video game represent to the person? So where this question came from, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he was saying that it added some detriment to his health. And maybe that's back to this idea of not being able to sleep or the blue light or being addicted to the video game. Or what the video game actually represents to him. There's some interesting stories about video games in Korea where they have these video game houses where you go and play video games, and essentially you play all day long. And these people become so disconnected to their physiology or their physical body, they actually go to the bathroom in their pants, don't eat, and just play for hours and hours and hours at a time. So for me, that's a pretty interesting thing to consider about, the TV, video games, Netflix, our distractions. The detrimental side of it is that it disconnects us from our physiology. It disconnects us from our kind of survival needs. Water, as Warren just drank, food, going to the bathroom. And also, from another perspective, one reason why I believe video games are so large, Netflix is so large, TV, Facebook are so large, is because many of us are in what's called the unlived life. We wish we were living a different life than what we're living. So we're looking outside of us for fantasy. We're looking outside of us to live somewhere else because our personal reality isn't living up to what we think it should be. I should have been this, I could have done that. All of the kind of the shame and blame of what hasn't happened or occurred in my life. So for me to escape from that, I use video games, I use Netflix, etc. Now, I also want to say that I think that we can also escape in the same way, doing over meditating, over studying, and etc. So it's not just video games. So looking at what that represents to the person, I think, is really important. What are they trying to escape from? And then maybe from a lighter side of that, I believe that as a human being, my own personal experience is fantasy is also necessary. Fantasy is a place where I can escape from my reality. Sometimes I need an escape too. Whether that, again, is video games, Netflix, meditating, checking out, going to self-hypnosis, etc. So I think fantasy actually plays a beautiful role in our lives too on the light side, where we can start to look at, okay, well, what am I fantasizing about? And what I'm fantasizing about can be kind of signposts for aspects of my life that I am denying myself or not willing to kind of look at and maybe go after, or in CHEK speak, create a dream or a legacy or a purpose? How do I start to look at my fantasies as what I think is not showing up in my life, and using that as a way to help us create a new path that may be more beneficial from a physiological perspective and from a health perspective, rather than always checking out with video games or always checking out with Netflix. Using it to our advantage to learn from, rather than using it as a place to just say shame and blame, essentially, or shame and guilt. And our friend's question, I think something that happens, and Warren, I really would love to hear your perspective on this too, because I know you've worked with a lot of people, inclusive of yourself. Something that I notice in kind of the health and wellness realm that you and I play in is that as we're learning that, a lot of practitioners or people who get into it get to a place where they think that they have to be perfect to be healthy. And that rigidity, from my perspective, causes more detriment. And then, you know, we look at things like video games. I've had clients who say, well, you know, Paul CHEK doesn't do that. And I have to reframe them on, okay, let's get clear on what you're projecting onto Paul CHEK, and then pedestaling somebody. Or if it's me teaching a class and they pedestal me and believe I don't do these things, and then they walk around in this complete, you know, shame, fear, and rigidity, thinking they need to be me or Warren or Paul, not actually who we are, but who they think we are. And I think that's that's probably a bigger issue that comes up for me around this. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, Warren.
Yeah, you know, that's so true. Everything you said, I'm right on point with it. I have a little story about that. I remember one time I had a former client come to see me. As you know, they go away and they come back. You know, they go explore everything else, and then they come back and say, damn, I have to actually get real with this. But they always go somewhere else to find an escape from the truth. But the truth always comes regardless. And so she came back to me. And I can't remember how we got into it, but at some point we were talking about films. And then she goes, what? You've got a TV? Yes. She goes, what? You watch movies? I was like, okay. I said, do you think I just sit upstairs and go, and then the door rings, ding dong, I get up and I run downstairs. I work with you and I come back upstairs, until the next person. And then she started laughing. She was like, probably not. And I was like, yeah, I have fun too. You know, I remember when Paul was talking about at level 4, he said, look, you have to have 4 logical things and 4 illogical things that you do from time to time. He goes, look, I don't care if you're masturbating, so long as it's logical. Some people may argue masturbation does have an outcome, so it's quite logical. You know?
Oh dear, I feel I have to, and I'm going to have to do some serious editing on this presentation.
But you know, there are things that we do, like such as I remember when we were working on our illogical things, and Paul said, write down the things that you do that are illogical. And I said, oh, I stay up at weekends and I watch a lot of UFC stuff. And Paul said, fine, so long as you're not betting on the outcome, because then you're doing it for a specific goal and it's logical. Logical things have outcomes and logical things don't have an outcome. So, you know, it's important for us to do things that are not met with a specific outcome. And if it's gaming, like you said, to kind of just have that escapism, then it's fine. And when we go back to a lot of our Native American and Peruvian ancestors, a lot of them, part of their saying was, if you don't tell stories, the society dies. So like what you were saying, Jator, a lot of these people, we do need this fantasy, and the fantasy is part of this telling the story. Like maybe there's a warrior who only actually beat 3 guys 5 years ago, but you know, 100 years he's beating 50 guys. You know, it becomes a fantasy.
Yeah.
So, you know, we expand it, and a lot of that gives us this hope, this sense of becoming, and this sense of being, and perfectionism. So, and a lot of that is leading us towards wanting to more. So that fantasy and that ability to want to grow from some story is important, and we tell those stories from some of these games, like you said. So I think that's like you said, some people put us on these pedestals unrealistically so they can justify why they can't be what we are.
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of get and sort of hear the two of you talk about something that I think is a recurrent theme when we talk about, you certainly touched on it, Jator, is escapism, right? And you talked about how video games can be a form of escapism, and I think rightly point out that those video games aren't the only way that we do this, right? I mean, we can do this. Everybody has their own way of doing it, whether it's books or movies or sports, right? I mean, going for a long run sometimes for me is a serious form of escapism. So we can do it through physical activity, we can do it through video games, we can do it through reading books, whatever. But usually when you talk about escapism, it triggers this. Oh God, it's something you sort of feel a little bit guilty about, right? I guess I wonder, I'd like to hear you two talk about, at the point at which, at some point it seems like a little bit of escapism is natural and maybe okay, but when do you start to shift those balances between when it's a natural valve that, is perfectly healthy and when it's something that becomes perhaps not so healthy, holding you back from your dreams or whatever?
Well, I'll dive in first.
Do it.
All right. What I appreciate most, at least what I heard some of what James say and some of what you shared, Warren, is this idea of this pedestaling idea. And I think this kind of goes into this escapism, kind of shame and guilt about escapism. And when we look at the spiritual path, or what people call the spiritual path, or mental and emotional self-work or self-exploration, a lot of us find gurus, one, or two, we find great sages of the past. Let's just say Buddha is one that I think is pretty obvious to many people, or maybe Jesus. And what I find most fascinating about that is that we actually project onto Jesus and Buddha and make up stories about who they were as people. And then we create these fascinating, larger than life stories about, oh, actually these people weren't human beings. They were, they were always meditating like Warren upstairs, always meditating and not having a TV, or not having their own way of escapism, etc. So then we create these very, very high pedestals for ourselves, whether it's a great sage or a guru or a teacher. And then when we do things that are outside what we project, that's my favorite thing about the iPhone. When we do things outside of what we project onto the people that we think we want to be like, we start to create a tremendous amount of guilt and shame for ourselves. So for me, what's really fascinating is if more gurus, more teachers, more leaders were actually more honest about who they are as human beings, rather than representing and presenting themselves as the all-knowing, the all-perfect, or flawless. Now, I'm not saying that all of them do that, but what I notice that a lot of people do who are in those roles is they don't give a lot of voice to what their struggles are, what their fears are, what their emotional, mental turmoils are, how they deflect, how they're afraid of vulnerability, etc. Because if more of the leaders did that, that actually then would make these other things more okay for others to do as well. Oh, wow, Paul smokes out of a vaporizer. As you know, now a lot of people are like, cool, vaporizing is a cool thing to do. Now, I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just simply saying that the more that we can share ourselves as human beings, I think the more that we can all learn from each other rather than pedestaling. And then what happens from my perspective is something like escapism. The light side of that is back to this fantasy idea, or what I love what Warren was talking about, the logical and illogical, which brings up this idea of wanderment for me, like allowing yourself to wander, allowing yourself to get out of the drive mind, the completion mind, get it done mind, the masculine mind, the yang mind. That mind needs a rest. And we need to be able to wander and do playful things, pleasurable things, connective things, community things. For me, this talk with the three of us is pleasurable, it's playful, it's fun, and it's community. And that is a beautiful thing for me. And where maybe escapism or fantasy becomes an issue is if it does start to show up as detrimental to your circadian rhythms, to your gut health, to your ability to feel your body. And then how do we then create ways to help someone move out of that and create ways to make these escape things beneficial rather than detrimental?
Yeah, I'd like to just add something to that as well. With which you touched on, Jator, about this perfectionism, this pedestaling sort of thing, where when we look at women, when we look at the pressure that women are placed under to look a specific way, and you relate this back to this size 0 and the supermodel thing, even just the idea, I remember when watching Bruce Lee when he did that famous talk on that show, I forget what it's called, but like a 35-minute show when he was talking about Be Like Water, that famous interview. And he was talking about, I don't like this word, superstar. You know, when he spoke about it. And it's true because he's saying, you know, this separation where these are the elite of the world and you're trying to aspire to be them, but you can never be them. So you do everything possible to become them. And you look at the glorification of plastic surgery in places like Hollywood, where you have a lot of women, you know, taking out their bottom ribs to have more narrow waists. That's where, like Jator was saying, that's where it becomes detrimental, because this is based on a fantasy of an image of a woman who's been labeled a super model, and you're trying to become like that superhuman. So it becomes detrimental when you spend money on yourself. And we know people die from plastic surgery, taking out ribs and all these sort of things that are harmful physiologically to our bodies. And then I remember when Paul was talking about this idea of supermodels, and he said as a class, supermodels have the worst breathing, because imagine what a supermodel walking down the runway diaphragmatically breathing with their belly down. That would just be weird. They hold their stomachs in for the whole time when they're walking up and down, so they're obviously creating an inverted breathing pattern. So the women will see that and they'll stop themselves from making their stomach come out, which again is detrimental to their health, because they're mimicking something, as you said, pedestaling, and mimicking, oh, these women, their stomachs don't move, this is the right way to do it. So that's kind of like another example of this detriment that we have with this perfectionism or this fantasy, kind of branching off from the actual video game thing, but the concepts that the game relates to is this mindfulness, perfectionism, fantasy, escapism. The other thing I wanted to just add to that with escapism is a lot of people, obviously they're doing these things to numb the pain of their lives because of the unmet need, the sense of lack of fulfillment. And that itself isn't good, because if you try to numb the pain long enough, the pain gets worse because you're just burying it further and further and further rather than actually bringing it to the surface. So numbing the pain doesn't stop the pain from being there. You have to embrace it and explore it and grow from it. So, you know, that's another thing that we have to kind of get these to think about. And, you know, when we look at Joseph Campbell's, you know, the hero's journey, like what Jator was saying, you know, a lot of these people that see these superstars and, you know, these athletes and all these sort of people, they think that they were born perfect. But in order for you to be successful, as Joseph Campbell shows, you have to go through an ordeal before you can get to the reward. So there's always pain before the pleasure. So, you know, and these people that are trying to escape pain because they think pain is wrong because all these people are perfect are misunderstanding the fact that, no, you need pain to create perfection. Like Tony Robbins even said that if he had the mother he wanted, he'd never be the man he is today. He had to feel that pain to want to do the opposite of it. So that's kind of, something I was kind of wanted to share as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
There's another and sort of related concept, Jator, that you brought up, and I think there might be a sort of synergy here that you were talking about the young sort of mind and this idea that when we're in the world, a lot of time in our career, in our job, in our daily life, a lot of it is about success and have you completed these tasks and have you paid your bills and that sort of thing. And I wonder, sort of building off the escapism sort of thing too, in a way, if you play games lately, it's just a different set of tasks, right, and a different set of goals you have to do, but it's super young also, right? In the sense that there's stages, and depending upon what the goal is, you can get better gear and level up, and whatever it is. And a lot of these games are super treadmills too. Like World of Warcraft has been going on for like 10 years now, and people have been playing this for 10 years, and they just get every year like there's an update, and they just have to get back on that treadmill and get the new better gear. And so it's all of this achievement oriented, very young sort of drive. But the difference, I wonder, sort of building on the escapism sort of thing, is that that's an environment in which you can take risks and work on these challenges really with very little risk, right? It's an environment that's built for me to succeed. And so I can find the kind of success and achievement in a video game, regardless of background or upbringing or whatever, that I might not well be able to in the world, right? And without the sort of consequences, in a way, I could be anonymous and take risks, and whatever. There's no real risk there. And so I wonder what you think about that, right? The need for escapism, and then the offering of possibilities for success that we might not be able to find without great risk in the real world.
I guess what I find really interesting is of what you shared. Yes, there's a lot of, I think, truth to that. This idea of it sets us up for maybe for a fantasy life. So in our lives, then we become less maybe realistic about how we live our lives. So if we're living in a world that consequence actually isn't present in a sense, for me, I would put that in the category then of almost essentially dysfunctional parenting of self. Because for me, an aspect of dysfunctional parenting is not teaching a child or self that there are going to be positive and or negative outcomes to your choices. And that fantasy land could lead some people to a place in their current lives where they are actually then disrespecting or not having reverence for the physiological body, their emotional body, their mental body, their spiritual body, their intuitive bodies, by always being in this fantasy land and then not noticing the consequences, as Warren gave voice to, pain, not even noticing that they're numbing out that pain. So that pain gets initially numbed out. They're disregarding that because a part of their consciousness is actually checked out that that's even a possibility, because they live in a world essentially of not a lot of consequence. That pain then grows. So it then grows to, a parasite or fungal infection or back pain or a knee issue, whatever it is. They don't pay attention to that, and that continues to grow, which then continues to cause other symptoms until maybe the person's at a point of close to death, global dysfunction, and or just completely has actually lost all sense of reality, in that they've completely lost their jobs, their connection with the outside world, any social environment. And I could see that being a detriment, which we've given voice to this place in Korea where people just are playing video games and literally, excuse my English, like taking a shit in their pants and not getting up to change, not even considering that it's time to go to the bathroom. That is a sense of disregard for consequence. So I could see that definitely playing a role in our society. And then as that grows, then we also become numbed out to how we treat other people. Because if we're willing to treat ourselves with so much, in a sense, disrespect and lack of reverence for our body and who we are as human beings, then we're also going to be much more likely to do that with the outside world.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add, you know, when you were saying about this the safety net that they have, where life isn't working for them in the outs or the real world, then they can go into the virtual world and create success there. They can go and buy all the guns and the armor and all sorts of stuff. It's a sense of achievement.
Yes.
It's a sense of some achievement. So in some senses, that's kind of good because they didn't achieve in the real world, but at least there's something to make them feel fulfilled. But like Jator said, it's not the real world. So even though it's almost alleviating their lack of fulfillment, it's actually exchanging one sense of true health for another more bad health. So that's the downside to it. So, you know, there is some positives to it, but not for too long. I mean, for when you are not even being aware of the concept of I need to get up and pee.
Yeah.
No, just that one.
Yeah, and you know, when you were talking about this, Jator, it was making me think of these. You know, I've read about these experiments where they'll take a rat and they will attach electrodes to the pleasure centers of its brain, and then they'll put it in a cage where it's got a little bar that it can push, and by pushing that bar, it will stimulate their pleasure centers, and they'll have food and the bar, and the rat will just keep hitting that bar until it starves to death. Right? It will completely ignore. Now, video games may not be quite on that same level because they don't directly stimulate your pleasure center, but you know they've got this sense of reward, and you know you talk about achievements, and what you were talking about achievements, Warren, and this is fascinating because a lot of games now actually have built into them what they call an achievement system. So you get not just rewards for completing a level, but like how fast you do, how many creatures you kill at once, or all these crazy and hundreds and hundreds of different achievements. And they'll actually a big star will burst onto the screen and give you this sort of golden announcement when you make this achievement, right? And it's all about making you feel special. And so I'm sure from underneath the game perspective, it's we want to keep you playing, and even if you've completed this level, you're going to try it again because there's all these achievements that you didn't get, right? But that is almost like the direct stimulation of those pleasure centers, right? If I keep playing, I keep getting more achievements and I keep getting rewards, and then you go. You can forget to eat and sleep and do all those other sorts of things that turn out to be important for your health. Yeah.
So something I think then is important for us to touch on, Warren. I'd love to hear your thoughts too, and James as well. Is because this guy was also asking, okay, so how do I move this into my life?
Yeah, right.
And to be something that I can do, because I think that's important too, because I don't want to create a sense that this is a negative thing, because there's I think a negative and positive to it. So one thing Warren gave voice to, and I think it was something in the statistics about a raising of their hand-eye coordination.
Yeah,
was that something you were speaking of? And I wanted to share something from my own experience of that. Is I've been into video games for a long time. I don't currently play them anymore, not because of a judgment. There's just other ways I'd rather distract myself, like Netflix. So there's some really good shows I want to plug right now, but I'll hold back. But so a friend of mine's a Marine, and he took me to a shooting range, and I'd never shot an actual gun. And we go to the shooting range, and we set up the shooting range, etc. And I tear it apart. I'm like getting like bullseyes, like clack, 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 clack. And he's all over the place. And he's a trained Marine. And he said, Jator, where did you learn that? And I was, Nintendo, Duck Hunt is where I learned it. Is where I learned that. And then so I was thinking, okay, well, that's really interesting. And I play ice hockey, hand-eye coordination. My video games probably help that. But I think what's important, outside of that is, okay, well, if you are going to play video games, what are some things that can be helpful to make it a positive experience? So for me, some of the things that can't come off the top of my head, back to Lauren talking about the blue light, is get some amber glasses or some blue light blocking glasses so that you can play without that detriment or less of it. Be mindful and set timers. I think this is important for anything electric or anything in this world at this point. Being mindful and setting a timer, maybe a timer that goes off after 15 minutes of playing. Then you pause, you get up, maybe go do some stretches, get some water, go outside, and then you can come back and then hit another timer. Maybe the second timer is 45 minutes, so you get this nice long run. Pause it and then go off and do something else again. Call a friend, get outside, do some mobilization, drink some water, move your body, do a couple breathing squats. Maybe playing video games while you're balancing on your knees on a stability ball sounds to me like an awesome idea, and I'm going to do it and give that a roll because that sounds fun. And then I'm getting all of the neurological work and core work, etc. But I'd love to hear any ideas you have too, Warren or James, because I think part of the issue that I was bringing up earlier around health and wellness, vitality, is that we set this bar so high that this is where the bar needs to be for you to be healthy and well. And I think that's complete and utter BS. I think the bar is flexible, and that balance is a dynamic state. It's not a static state. And I think if more of us can share that with the world, that it's a dynamic state, not static, and that for me at least, health and wellness is about being flexible, open, curious, and having a sense of awareness of, okay, well, if I am going to play video games, cool. How do I celebrate it, enjoy it, and make it a part of my life, not all of my life?
Fantastic. Love that. Love that. Just to kind of add to that as well about this, this not having this barrier of perfection or elitism. I remember, because, again, we were saying earlier about pedestaling all these people, and a lot of that creates this depression and want of escape. So how can we manage that? I remember Matthew McConaughey, when he did his Oscar speech, after he won his Oscar, and he said someone came up to him many years ago when he was in his 20s and said to him, who's your hero? And then he said he thought about it. He said, let me get back to you. And he got back to him in a few days. This is part of his Oscar speech. And he goes, me, in 10 years from now. The guy goes, what do you mean? He goes, me in 10 years from now. He goes, because in 10 years from now, I'll be better than I am now. And then he said the guy saw him like 10 years later. He goes, okay, so I guess you're your hero. And he goes, no, not even close. He goes, my hero is me in 10 years' time. His point was, never beat my hero. Beat my hero because I am my own hero, but I'm always growing. So if we can put that into perspective and think, you know what, this perfectionism it's not realistic. But if I am my own hero, then I can't be disappointed because, there's nothing beyond what I already am. And tomorrow I'm a better version of myself than I am today. So we kind of accept that. And there's no need for depression or escapism. And like Paul says, every challenge in our life is a beautiful opportunity for growth. So if something bad happens and you can see it like that, then you don't think I need to escape. So again, playing video games should be done out of joy, love, and the ability to achieve, as opposed to avoidance of life.
Yeah.
So, that's a key thing. And then the other thing I want to kind of bring up was just this need to explore joy in our lives. I remember one guy was talking about the septum pellucidum, which is the joy center of the brain. And scientists had found that they studied animals and stuff, and they'd done tests on humans, and they found that the joy center of our brain is a third of the size that it used to be 200 years ago, and it means that we are experiencing less joy. So, in order for us to get the same level of joy we did even 200 years ago, we're having to go to extremes to find that same level of joy. So, having joy in the simple things in life, like look at a rose, how beautiful it is. Look at a child, when a child is just laughing and happy. We've desensitized ourselves to the simplicity of beauty and joy, to the point where if you watch a car crash on TV, oh my gosh, then the next time you see the same car crash, it's like, I've seen that. Then you want a car with a truck. Then you want 10 trucks. So we always want bigger and bigger and bigger rather than just being happy with the little things. And so finding the beauty in nature, finding the joy in the little things, finding the joy in the smile from a stranger, you know, finding the joy in the sunrise and things like that. If we can get back to that sort of appreciation, then the need for playing video games is out of joy rather than the need to not we're trying to avoid. You know, so I think, you know, that's definitely something. But I love this idea of Jator talking about playing video games on a stability board or a Duro disc.
Yeah.
I think fantastic. And I think the idea, it's almost like looking at video games almost like a workout and then doing the workout. So I love that idea of getting people to alarm themselves. So, you know, definitely like Jator said, those are great things for this guy to explore with video games. But, you know, video games aren't evil. Not, you know, there's nothing really evil. It's like a gun isn't evil. It's what you do with it. Like this. So video games aren't evil. And, you know, you both said that you play video games. And I used to be a gamer myself. I used to go to the arcades and play video games. I'm looking at my PS4 that I haven't played for 2 years. But I've still got one. You know, I wish I had the time to play it. But I'm so busy growing. And I think one thing I was kind of say to summarize this, I remember someone said, we are either consuming or we are creating. So when we're playing video games, a lot of time we're just consuming. So make sure you balance your consuming, which is what you're just doing for yourself, and you're creating, which is what you're giving to others. And if you can do both, then video games isn't a detriment.
Yeah, and Jator, we've talked about some of these sorts of things in the context of food, right? But it's like saying if you had maybe not so healthy a relationship with food, and then pointing the finger at the food, right, and saying, well, the food was the evil, the food, right? Yeah. And so I think it's all, you know, you create a relationship with whatever aspect of your lifestyle. You create a relationship with your food. You create a relationship, you know, with sleep. You create a relationship with your video games, and it's what you bring to that relationship that I think has a lot to say about the outcome of that relationship. And I'll share a story. And this isn't a video game. This is about video games, but it's about weed and what sort of changed my perspective about weed. And when I was in grad school, I had a really good friend who he wrote probably the smartest, best dissertation I had ever read. But his work day was he would get up at 9, or get up and then start his work on his dissertation at 9 and work on it till 5, and then he would be done. And he would put it away, and he would get done what he would get done. And then he would have a joint. But for him, it wasn't about escape. He got his stuff done, and this was just his way of sort of letting his mind go at the end of the night. But after he had gotten absolutely everything done, and you know, you hear these things about all the terrible consequences of smoking, you know, marijuana and what can it do to you, but it was genius. It was super smart. And you know, and some part of me always wondered, well, was part of the reason why it was so good was because he gave his mind the chance to take a break at the end of the day, and did this and then started up again. And I think probably, you know, maybe video games fall into that sort of category, that if you know, come to it, as Warren was saying, with this sort of just joy, right? It's just going to be fun. It's about playing. It's not really about anything else. It's just, and that may make the entire difference with your, you know, the relationship you have and the consequences that it has for you.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And what I really loved about what Warren shared brought something up for me that I think it's something very powerful that I use in my own life, and I use with clients as well. And he brought up this the future self being the hero, and I think it's such a powerful place that I don't think many of us go into considering in any moment our own inner guidance, our own inner wisdom, to ask the question, what would my future self share with me today? What would my future self from 10 years from now share with me today? And let that be my guru and my guide. And that's beautiful to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, this has been really, you know, I think really enlightening. And I think we're all sort of on the same page about video games. And I hope this has been a help to you, Shazib. Sorry again for the pronunciation of your name, but thank you for a great question, because that was a really good one, really thought-provoking, so thank you. And thanks to you guys, thanks to Warren and Jator for joining me today. This was, you know, we need to do this more often.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Super fun.
Yeah.
It was super playful, joyous, pleasurable, and for me, there was a lot of illogical stuff going on, so I was loving it.
And I was gonna say there are competitive video game players, and you know what's gonna happen? We're gonna hear in like a year that they're all training on Swiss balls. They're all playing their video games on Swiss balls to get ready for their matches. And you heard it here, right? Or you heard it from these guys. So credit where credit is due.
They're super fascinating. About a year ago, there's a very popular racing car game. I can't remember the name of it right now, but a year ago they sent out a message to all people who had this game to have a contest to see who was the best video game driver. So they did this kind of globally, and then they narrowed that down to 100 of the best drivers in the world on video games. And they paid for those 100 best drivers to come to their facility and play against each other in person on a video game that's set up with like a steering wheel, and you have a stick shift and all that. So you sit in it. So then they dwindled that down to one singular winner. And what they didn't tell the winner was the winner actually won a contract with a real racing team in a real car.
Oh, wow.
Then they took that guy and put him in a real car, and he was a freaking badass on the track, never driving a car on the track. So that is amazing to me, how good video games are getting at this point where there is actually a crossover into real life.
Wow. Yeah. Does that mean there's still hope for me to be a Jedi then?
I mean, you got the Sith outfit on today, Jay.
I'm total light side. I don't know what you're talking about.
Old with the Force, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Warren is the better Jedi because he has the gray on, and the gray Jedi humbly bowed to the light and shadow side. So the Sith and Jedi together.
Wow. Wow. Fine. All right. Well, thanks again so much, guys. This has been brilliant. And I'm going to find a way to get the two of you back together again so that we can do this because this was fantastic.
Yeah,
cool.
I appreciate the question from the guy as well. So for the guy whose name I'm not even going to bother attempt, but thank you very much because that gave us the opportunity for me to spend some time with Jator, which I haven't had a chance to. So I'm so grateful, Jator, to spend some time with you because you've been rocking it, just doing some mad skills on the CHEK blogs in the interim where a lot of us were busy and stuff. So I'm grateful to be able to share this with you.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say, Warren, is and to our friend who asked the question is there's a few people in the world that are practitioners that I have a very high respect for, and they have a lot of respect for you, and I hear nothing but really cool things about you. And I remember seeing you at the CHEK talk a long time ago when you presented with Jade, I think her name was. Yeah. And I remember seeing you on stage, and I was like, man, this dude's so cool. And I introduced myself to you, which I'm sure you don't remember me because I was a nobody, and I still am a nobody, and you still see me that way. But nonetheless, it's an honor, my friend, to do this with you, and honored to be on the team with you and have you as a part of my life, and I look forward to more.
Yeah, so grateful for your words, and thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, I want to give props to both of you guys because you do great work for the CHEK Institute, and I know you do great work for your clients too. So it's important for me to give credit where credit is due. So thanks to both of you for all that you do.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Thank you, man.
Thank you, guys.
Like I said, it's always easy for me. I just start you guys going and step back and watch it all happen. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Peace out, guys.